Hello, good morning, everyone. Jim back with you for another daily devotional, word by word today, verse by verse, line by line in First Thessalonians. And I want to just welcome you back to another day. I know this has been kind of a messy kind of week because we have holidays and depends where you live, depends how you celebrate it and that sort of thing. But for us here in the U.S., it's we have a broken up week. We have Christmas, and then we have a couple of days, and then we have New Year's, and then a couple of days, and people don't really get back really to work really until about the beginning of next week. But regardless, we're going to keep plugging along here with First Thessalonians. On top of it, I'm a bit under the weather, which is always a challenge for me. My wife laughs and says I have a man cold. I don't. I think men get colds worse, and I've told her that before. I'm like, I think we just get colds worse. I never see her walking around the way I do. Never see her do that. But anyway, it's a great mystery, right? But anyway, welcome back, and we're going to be continuing with First Thessalonians chapter 2. Now, this a lot of this in the beginning of First Thessalonians, in this particularly in this letter, it's a lot of real greeting and a lot of just encouragement and that sort of thing. But I don't want to go, just gloss over that. There are some nuggets in here, particularly in this section, where he's going to talk about Philippi. And I want to point you, the way I'm set up, I really can't get to go back and forth between different parts of the Word of God, the Bible, because it's too complicated the way I have it set up. So I'm just going to refer to it. And I'll mention that right now. A little bit what he's starting to talk about here is really referred to in Acts chapter 16. So if you have an interest in kind of knowing more about the situation, it's spoken of in great detail in Acts chapter 16 with Philip and Timothy and Silas and prison and that sort of thing. So if you have an interest in that, you can go there and see this exact story that he's referring to in First Thessalonians. So anyway, let's just get with it here. Let me get into the Word. Let's read it and see what the Lord has for us. Okay. All right. It's long, but I think it's not that involved. So let's get to it. Okay. So let's start from 2:1. He says, "For you yourselves know, brethren, that our coming to you was not in vain." Again, he's writing this, just to mention this. He's writing this, Paul is writing this to the Thessalonian church in Thessalonica. Okay? "But after we have already suffered and been mistreated in Philippi," there you go, the reference to Philippi, "as you know, we had the boldness in our God to speak to you the gospel of God amid much opposition. For our exhortation does not come from error or impurity or by the way of deceit. But just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, so we speak, not as pleasing to men, but God who examines our hearts. For we never came with flattering speech, as you know, nor with a pretext for greed. God is witness. Nor did we seek glory from men, either from you or from others, even though, as apostles of Christ, we might have asserted our authority. But we proved to be gentle among you, as a nursing mother tenderly cares for her own children, having so fond an affection for you. We were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you have become very dear to us. For you recall, brethren, our labor and hardship, how working night and day, so as not to be a burden to any of you, we proclaim to you the gospel of God. You are witnesses, and so is God, how devoutly and uprightly and blamelessly we behave toward you believers. Just as you know how we were exhorting and encouraging and imploring each one of you as a father would his own children, so that you would walk in a manner worthy of the God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory." Okay, that's rather there's a lot there, but you can get what I'm saying. The essentially it is a greeting, and he's talking about here. Paul makes reference to this section, so to Philippi. Now, the belief is that again, this letter is written very early on, about AD 50-51, only 20 years from Christ's crucifixion. 20 years. It's really, really recent. So it's really fresh in some of the apostles' mind and hearts. And I mean, they're come out of Jerusalem. The idea is that he's writing this from Corinth, actually. And so he's writing this from Corinth, coming out of Philippi, which again, Philippi, a lot of this is in Macedonia too, which is all on the Greek nation, as in Thessalonica. So there's a lot of consistency. There's a lot of Greece in this, if you obviously realize it. There's a lot here in Paul's missionary journeys. So anyway, that's what he's talking about, and let's just read it and get into a little bit more detail. All right, so he says this. He says, "For you yourselves know, brethren, that our coming to you was not in vain." Oh, let me switch my pen. And what he's saying here is ultimately that that there was a purpose. It wasn't in vain. That they came, it wasn't in vain. There has been some fruit, okay, essentially. But after we have already suffered and been mistreated in Philippi. Now, in Philippi, and he says, as you know, we have had the boldness in our God to speak to you the gospel, okay? This section here, had the boldness in our God, okay? This means a true reliance on God because they were in prison in Philippi. Okay, so he's saying, hey, look, after we came out and have already suffered, being put in prison, they were beat and everything, they still come out in boldness in God because of the power of God to speak to you the gospel of God amid much opposition. So there's still opposition here. Remember, a lot of this is coming from the Jews. What the Jews see is another God. They don't see Jesus, obviously. There's a real opposition here. And he says, for our exaltation does not come from error, impurity, or deceit. In other words, I think he's kind of justifying what everyone is saying out there in the streets about them. And he's saying, look, there's no error. We're not being impure here. We're not trying to be deceitful. Okay? Just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. Right? Not as pleasing men. Not as pleasing men. And I think that's key. But to God, who examines our hearts. So the ultimate, when they're doing this ministry, the ultimate thing they need to be proving here is to God himself, that their hearts are pure. And I think God is the only true judge of our heart, right? No one really knows what's going on in there but God completely. I mean, honestly, even at times we may not even know what's going through our heart. We may be blinded to our own deceitfulness or our own pride. So he's again pointing to God as being the ultimate authority, the ultimate judge of what they're doing, and not by men. Okay. And he says this, and he just carries us on. He goes, we never came with flattering speech, as you know, nor the pretext for greed. God is our witness, his witness. We didn't seek glory from men, right? Either from you or others. And then he does say this, even though as apostles of Christ, we have asserted our authority. So he's saying, look, we have the authority here to do a lot of things by God himself. We have the spiritual authority over you, but we're not going to use that. Well, number one, we're not going to use it for evil. We're not going to use it for greed, right? We're not going to use it for pride. But even though we did that, and I think he improves it here, look in 7. But we prove to be what? Gentle among you. How gentle? As a nursing mother cares for her own children. Okay? That's how gentle. I think we all need to be reminded of that, right? Ultimately, when you think of ministry and you think of serving others and loving people, we can get impatient. True love is truly patient, kind, right? Like in 1 Corinthians 13, it speaks of love. And if you're going to love people, you're going to do it gently, and you're going to be patient and have grace and mercy. And they never, in other words, a lot of times we can do ministry or if we're ever speaking the gospel, we could fall back on fleshly ways of doing things, right? We can go back to the fleshly norms, if you will. We can revert back to the worldly ways, and we could use flattering speech, right? And we could try to be eloquent in our speech here, and that sort of thing. And some of us are better speakers than others, right? Some of us have a better, more charismatic ways of doing things, right? And that's okay. I mean, that's something about our giftings. But they don't resort to that. They resort here, obviously, to be, particularly with this church, to be gentle. And Paul is saying that. Like, he is saying we have been gentle. We are, excuse me. Sorry about that. We are just like a nursing mother cares for her own children. So it is very patient and sometimes slow. And that's the way ministry is. That's the way people are, right? We are all at different places, and that's what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. He's not saying that here, but that's what it is. I mean, let's go back. Let's continue this. So he says here, he goes, having so fond an affection for you. So this is really coming from their heart of affection, right? We were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives. That's interesting. In other words, they gave all of themselves for them. Maybe they had some risk there by going there, like they did in, I guess they visited them before, obviously, when they planted the church. And maybe there's a lot of risks to them bodily, potentially. That's maybe what he's pointing to. And he says, you become very dear to us, right? And he says, for you recall, brethren, that we labored and hardshiped, that they worked night and day. Now, what he's talking about is they worked in jobs. What? Not to be a burden to any of you. We proclaim the gospel. So they worked, right? They supported themselves, right? So they supported themselves. They did it so they wouldn't be a burden to the church, because the church was probably very small. They couldn't hold them up and maybe feed them even. Who knows? So when they were there, so this is a consistent witness, and I think that's important to realize. And he says in 10, he goes, you are witnesses, and so is God. Witnesses to what? How devoutly and uprightly and blamelessly we have behaved toward you believers, you in the church. He's just stating a fact. He's not prideful. He's affirming. Look, we have done this, and you are the witnesses that we've done this in the proper way. That's what he's saying. And he says this, just as you know how we were exhorting and encouraging and imploring each one of you as a father would his own children. Why? So that you would walk in a manner worthy of God, of the God who calls into his own kingdom and glory. It's amazing, isn't it? Anyway, I just wanted to kind of go over this with you. I thought it was really good. A little short today, but again, this is a constant, if you will, reminder of how our hearts should be towards one another with brotherly love and affection. So I'm going to go a little earlier today, but I will be back with you tomorrow. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful and blessed day.